YouTubers, welcome back to another episode of Small Engines Questions and Answers for Friday, February 18th, 2011. First of all, I want to send a big thanks to all those who sent me monetary gifts to my YouTube fund in the last week. I really appreciate that. Doesn't matter what the amount is, it's all helpful. How about you guys? Well, we got about 1.5 feet of snow last week, and a few days later it was melting. So it kind of seems like spring wants to come around. But I know we do have quite a few weeks of winter left. Now the first question today I got is, some of you guys saw the video I posted on the MTD snowblower for parts last week, and some of you guys were asking me, why don't I just weld the gearbox? Well, I've got the gearbox apart because I stripped the blower entirely for parts, and I'll show you exactly why I wouldn't waste the time or money trying to weld it. Here's the whole gearbox here taken apart. There used to be a lip here that went all the way up, as you can see here, but the upper part's missing. That broke off. All the holes have been expanded from wear and tear. Also on top here you can see a huge crack in the casing where the engine was bolted. If I turn it around to the other side, it's the same thing. There's a chunk missing out of here. And there's huge stress cracks. Same thing over here on the left side. This is how the lip should look on the other side, but there shouldn't be any cracks at all. Now the reason why I didn't fix this is because there's so many cracks in it. The metal is so thin, and even if you tried welding it where the cracks are, it could still break there in the future. Because this one is so badly damaged, it wasn't worth doing that. If I had a gear case like this with just one small crack, probably I would try to fix it, but in this case it was a total waste of time and money. And if you weld it for a customer and it breaks, well, guess what? They're going to come back with it and expect you to fix it for free. Save yourself the aggravation and just put a new part in there, then you're sure it's going to work properly. You can try welding it if you're fixing it for yourself and you don't mind tinkering with it if it keeps breaking again. Another question I got a lot after posting that video is some YouTubers asked me if I could make some kind of bracket over here like angle iron and drill holes through it to brace it. Well, the answer to that is yes, and I've done it to one of my snowblowers in the shop here, but it's my personal snowblower, so it was kind of an experiment, but I'll show you exactly how I did that. Now here's my Cub Cadet snowblower. It's made by MTD, and it's got the exact same parts as that snowblower that I tore down for parts. So as you can see down here, where they crack a lot, is I took some angle iron, drilled some holes, put bolts right through onto the other side, and bolted it to the blower. On this side here, where the auger is I just used the studs that stick out of the auger shell, drilled holes in the angle iron, and bolted it. It was quite a job because you got to make it fit properly and all that, but it's done the job because it's been on there for about 2.5 years. I'm going on my 3rd winter with it. The blower is getting rotted, that's why I painted the whole shell with some paint and a paintbrush. I used trim-clad rust paint for that and put it on really thick, because I get a lot of salt here where I live. I would only make brackets like that if the shell was still good and the back gearbox wasn't in too bad a shape. This gearbox was only slightly cracked where the bolts are, so it was worth fixing like that. And there was a lot of hours involved doing that, so like I said, if you do it for yourself, it's worth it. If you want to do it for a customer, it's kind of hard to charge for all those hours doing that unless you make a lot of brackets in advance. Then when somebody comes, you just slap one on. But make sure if you do that, that the gearbox isn't too cracked and also that the auger shell isn't rotted out completely. Also another tip, if you have small cracks on your gearbox and you want to get them welded, it may be hard to use a stick welder on this metal because it's so thin. Probably the best option would be to use a TIG welder because it can weld much smaller material like that without making more damage to the part itself. If you weld it yourself, then it's probably worth it financially, but if you have to pay a welder to weld all those cracks, I would say you're better off to go buy a brand new part. Another question people have been asking me is, where do you put all your nuts and bolts when you work on an engine? Well, usually I'll put my nuts and bolts in containers like this. I got a whole whack of these. I got about 100 of these, and they're very handy to put everything in. I got these from a factory and they said there was a defect in all of these so they couldn't use them. You can also use a magnetic tray, that's good too. And what I'll do too is I'll get a box if it's big parts and put it in the box and usually mark the box of the engine brand and name and model, and then I know exactly the parts that I've put away in a box. Then if I go to rebuild the engine, I've got all the parts in one box, and it's much easier that way. Also, if I know I'm not going to put the engine back together for like a month or more, I will even put the container with all the nuts and bolts in the box with the engine parts. When you've got a lot of projects on the go at once and you've got a lot of parts scattered, it's good to keep everything organized and in one spot for each engine, because in that way you're not going to be searching for parts or have to go buy another part because you can't find it anymore. And try to keep each project in its own area in your shop. Here's an old ice auger, by the way. An old Tecumseh 2-stroke. Well, that's it for this week. Thanks again for watching. Thanks for all the comments. It's very appreciated. And I will see you next Friday. Take care now.